Welcome back to the Trusted Visions Weekly Podcast. As we continue in March, we're going to continue down the topic of working with a third-party recruiting firm like Trusted Visions or going direct to the broker-dealer and the advantages and disadvantages of both of those. And so this week's topic, David and I are going to discuss how involved should the third-party recruiting firm or the consultant within that third-party recruiting firm be in your due diligence process with those broker-dealers, and what are their responsibilities? We all know what the financial advisor's responsibilities are, but how involved should or shouldn't the third-party recruiting firm be? Given that, like last week we talked about, we are getting paid by those broker-dealers for placing you, and so obviously we have to earn that money, David. So I'm going to kick it off to you to start, just because I started off last week's, and let you kind of give your opinion and feedback of how involved should people like you be with financial advisors, OSJs, or enterprise when they're exploring their broker-dealer options?
Well, that's a great question, because I think it can be customizable in a lot of cases. When you're looking at the individual advisor, when the last time you made a broker-dealer change, that has been quite some time, and how, I would say more complicated what the deal structure is going to look like. And once we dig into the weeds, it's going to give us a really good idea of how involved we should be. On what we provide as far as the value of Trusted Visions, being involved is where a big part of our value comes into play. Is we're basically going to look overall what the due diligence looks like with your individual practice and what kind of challenges we're going to run into. Being involved gives us the availability to really structure those deals that are beneficial for not only you, but your clients, but also make sure that nothing is missed. We talk about it constantly that if you're not changing broker dealers every 1 or 2 years, the landscape, the environment has changed from 6 months to 12 months over and over again. It seems like every time we turn around, about every 6 months, we've had a landscape change. So we try to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on out in the world so we can be effective and be a good partner. We definitely don't want to be a partner that is simply, hey, we're going to grab your name, get a couple of details in your GDC, and shoot you out to 10 different broker dealers. That's just not our mantra. We've been in the industry way too long where we want to really sit down, digest, ask and answer a lot of the pivotal questions that are involved with it. And make sure we're pointing in the right direction. We don't want you to be doing due diligence on 10 broker dealers. We don't want to do due diligence on 10 broker dealers. Nobody does. You want to limit it down, and you want to be able to really dig in and find out if that's going to be a true partnership for you, the advisor, if it's going to be a good fit. And we're going to help you uncover a lot of those landmines that you may run across. And that's where some of the big value comes into play.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I don't know how many times we've heard this. I just talked to an advisor earlier this week that said, I was with a small broker dealer, or I left a large broker dealer, was with a small broker dealer, and then 2 years down the road, that small broker dealer was swallowed up by the same broker dealer I left. And so that's where the involvement of people like the Trusted Visions team can really dig in and say, hey, if you're looking for a small broker dealer, that's fine. But here's the pros and cons to that, because there's some great small broker dealers that have a long-term vision to be in the industry for a long time. But the last thing these advisors want to do is go down the path of leaving a broker dealer and then 6, 12, 24 months down the road, they're right back within that broker dealer network. I'm sure we hear that time and time again. In addition to that, I think you could almost segment or do a subset of our work with both individual financial advisors and then OSJs or enterprises. With financial advisors, we really want to dig into what your long-term vision is of your practice. How close are you to your clients, and how important are your clients going forward? Because we probably need to go down the path of succession planning and understanding what your runway is for how long you want to be in the industry, because that's going to determine what direction with broker dealers we go. Now, with OSJs and enterprises, it's not just one individual that we're dealing with. We really need to understand the personalities of your OSJ or enterprise so that we can get to know, are you going to have retention issues? If so, how do we address that? And so to your point, David, when I established Trusted Visions and we built out this team that we've built, that's always been my motto of I want us to be extremely involved in the process, not because we're trying to micromanage the process, but we want to make sure that we're asking the hard questions that A, you may not know to ask, or B, you forget to ask. And we also want to be heavily involved so that we can push, we know where to push when we need to push, and we know when to tell you to back off. And so, I have been on every demo with advisors, every phone call with the broker dealer. I've even attended home office visits. Again, not trying to micromanage the process, but we want to be your advocate during this process. I tell advisors and OSJs all the time, going through that due diligence process, the broker dealer is going to want to try and get the best possible deal and get you for the least amount, but something fair, where you as the advisor, OSJ, or enterprise, you want to get the most. And so allow us as consultants with Trusted Visions to be that bad cop, so to speak, so that you're starting off that partnership right. Let us push and leverage. Now, I'll say some advisors, and I tell this to advisors and clients all the time, we're also going to push you during times where we need to push you to get stuff done. Not because we're trying to be aggressive about it, but at the same time, we have to push you to make sure that you meet whatever transition deadline you want, because life gets in the way, business gets in the way, and we try and track that throughout the entire process. And so back to you on this, David, you had mentioned, we're not ones that are just going to throw your name out to 10 broker dealers. What is a fair number of broker dealers that you typically introduce advisors to once you have that initial conversation or two? I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Every firm does it differently, but we're unique in that way. What is the number of broker dealers that you typically introduce an advisor, OSJ, or enterprise to?
My goal is 2 or 3. I would love to narrow it down to 2 and to be that pinpoint focus to be there. But in some cases, we may be looking at 4. So it could be 3 to 4 max, and looking at the overall opportunity that's out there. So we want to narrow it down so we can really laser in on what the opportunities are. And you mentioned a little bit earlier too, it's like being involved is, again, not us trying to micromanage the process, but it's also, we want to, when you're looking at these things, we want to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. So even when you're putting together these deals and you're looking at, somebody that's going to be willing to give you a very large check, we've seen those also, where you almost have to weigh that very large check option based upon what it's going to look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Is it really going to be a beneficial for both you and your advisor, especially when you look at the OSJ side of it? We've seen so many opportunities where it's just what they built has kind of just fell apart because of where they went, because they wanted a very large check that went along with it. Sometimes it's not always about the check. It's about what it's going to be and keeping your mantra, your goals, what you built as far as your OSJ or even your individual office. What you built, you want it to be the same. You want to be able to build off of that. And I probably said it time and time and time again, it's finding a partnership. It's a true partnership where they're actually going to help you achieve your goals and not be a hindrance in a lot of cases. But we also want to make sure that you're not a hindrance in the process, and not only make you get through the process, which I know is a pain. It's never easy. We're just we almost become kind of a life coach when it comes to getting people through the finish line, getting through the minutia that is the due diligence process. And, on top of that, and there is the due diligence process the broker dealer has to do. So it's a whole nother process. And that's kind of where we're a little bit of a life coach to kind of get you through that process so we can move on and get you back to doing business as usual.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because we worked with a particular OSJ or enterprise late last year that, for them, the upfront check wasn't nearly as important because we were talking through the long-term vision and they wanted to double, triple in size. And so for them, upfront money wasn't nearly as attractive as, hey, how do I get the best payouts and pricing, not only for my current group, but also going forward to grow. And I'll say that group will likely double, if not triple in size within a year of making that broker dealer change because of the payouts and pricing that they secured. And so that's a good point, David, when it comes to, let's really understand what's important to you going forward and what your vision is for the practice. To your other point, David, where you said, depending, if you've never made a broker dealer change, how many times do we get those advisors that haven't made a broker dealer change for 20, 30 years and say, yeah, I'm just going to do a block transfer? Well, no, you're not. You're not going to do block transfers anymore because they don't do them. And so, allow people like the consultants at Trusted Visions that have a pulse on the industry, that have been doing this day in and day out for nearly a century collectively, to guide you through that process. Again, not micromanaging you throughout that process, but guiding you through that process. And to your point, David, where you said, 2, maybe 3, at most 4 broker dealers, I couldn't agree with you more from the perspective of, and it drives me crazy, and I won't get on my tangent again, but it drives me crazy when you talk to an advisor that says, yeah, I'm working with XYZ third-party recruiting firm, and they've introduced me to 12 different broker dealers. If they've introduced you to 12 different broker dealers, that's going to be a full-time job in itself by having those initial calls with those broker dealers, doing the advisory demos, doing the technology demos. I couldn't foresee you doing a home office visit with each and every one of them. But by the time you get through that 12th firm, you don't remember what firms 1, 2, and 3's value was. Regardless of whether you're keeping the scorecard that you've always suggested, David, it becomes a jumbled mess. And so it's not that we don't have more broker-dealer relationships. We do, but we really try and hone in on what's important to you and your clients and your family, and let us introduce you to those 2, 3 broker-dealers. If we're completely wrong and none of those 2, 3 broker-dealers fit what you're looking for, we didn't do our job of listening. But secondly, we have other options. And it does happen where, we have to explore other options based off of something that comes up. But if a firm is trying to introduce you to 8, 10 broker dealers all at once, as you've put it in past podcasts, David, I would run. And I only say that because you're still working in your practice. You're still focusing on your clients. Working with a firm like Trusted Visions allows you to hand off that heavy lifting of finding the right broker dealer fit and the initial due diligence, so you can continue to focus on your clients. So I couldn't agree with you more, David, from the perspective of 2, maybe 3, at most 4 broker dealers. And like I said, quite honestly, if none of those work out, we probably haven't done our job. Anything you want to add to that, David?
No, I think probably the only other tidbit I'd probably add to that is, this is a give and take kind of industry. We're going to look at the big picture. When an advisor comes to us, sometimes they may have an idea of a couple broker dealers they want to look at. And we don't have a problem with that either. We're not a one size fits all. We're not just going to push you to broker dealers that either we have a contract with, which we do have a number of them, but we're also going to take your opinions into play too and walk through that process with you and understand a little bit more about, why would you want to look at that broker dealer and really break that down and find out if it's a good fit. If it's a good fit, even if we don't have a contract, we could probably get one in place. And worst case scenario, we'll be the first ones to tell you, I think it's a perfect fit for you. I think you should go for it. It's just one of those things. You and I and a lot of people have been in this industry a long time. Yes, we do it for a living, but it's also about making sure that we put you with the right broker dealer that's the good fit. And a lot of people probably don't like that on the third party recruiter side of the firm, but we're gonna push you to where it's going to be a good fit, and it's not really going to be so much of a push, which is probably a bad word. It's more of a guidance. Okay, we're going to be your guide to kind of get you where you need to be. And if it's with a broker dealer we feel it's the best fit for you, then it doesn't matter whether you work through us or not. We're going to make sure we push you in that direction.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I mean, I have a lot of conversations with advisors and OSJs and enterprises where I always tell them, hey, we don't get paid any differently from broker dealer A to broker dealer Z. And so I'm going to give you my unbiased opinion of, hey, the do's and don'ts, because no broker dealer is perfect. There's pros and cons with every broker dealer out there. There's no question about it. And so when working with firms like Trusted Visions, allow us to give you that feedback, understanding that we have the pulse on the industry. It's not that we're trying to be offensive towards a broker dealer, but we foresee a certain vision given what we do with certain broker dealers that you may or may not think of. And there's some broker dealers where I'll tell them, hey, I foresee in 3-4 years, they're likely going to sell or go public. And what does that mean for you? Well, I didn't realize that. And so I think that that's important to, leverage us and allow us to give you our opinion. You could disagree with it, and that's totally okay. The other thing that, in closing, I would say, David, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, is you and I and the Trusted Visions team have spent nearly a century in this industry, predominantly in the independent broker-dealer space in corporate America. And so we've put together thousands of different transition packages and deals and ran the analysis and however each broker dealer does it, leveraging firms like ours that we know what levers those broker dealers can pull, and guiding you through that process of, hey, if you want your payoffs to go up, let's negotiate maybe 1% or 2 percentage points less on the transition money. Or if you want your advisory pricing to go down, let's either take away from the payout by 1 point or 2, take away from the transition money, but allow us to give you those expertise because we know the analysis that these broker dealers run in order to put together their profitability on you and or your OSJ or enterprise. So anything you want to add to that, David, before I close?
No, I think that was a great synopsis of it, Jeremy. That's perfect.
Outstanding. Well, hope everyone enjoyed this week's podcast. We will continue and close out next week on this month's podcast series of working with a third-party recruiting firm or going direct to the broker-dealer and the advantages and disadvantages of it. I hope everybody has a great week, and we will be back together as a team next week. So thank you very much. We appreciate any comments you may have. If you have any questions, please email us at info@trustedvisions.com.